we're going to talk about exponential notation and order of operations. Now, an exponent denotes repeated multiplication. So an exponent tells you how many times you're going to multiply the base times itself. So for this first example, where I have expanded form of -7 times -7 times -7 times -7, I can rewrite that as -7 times itself 4 times. That would be -7 to the 4th power. Now, this is very different than, so I'm going to say it right off the bat, this is not the same as -7 to the 4th power. -7 to the 4th power without the parentheses is the same thing as -1 times 7 to the 4th power. And we'll readdress this in a later example. 5m times itself 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times would be written 5m in parentheses to the 5th power. And 8a times a times a would be 8 to the 1st power times a to the 3rd power. So now let's simplify some values. -7 squared is equal to -7 times -7, and a negative times a negative is a positive. 7 times 7 is 49. Versus -7 squared, this we're going to rewrite as -1 times 7 squared, which is -1 times 7 times 7. -1 times 7 is -7, and -7 times +7 is -49. So there's a big difference between these first two examples, this first example and this second example. So this exponent is attached to everything in the parentheses. This exponent isn't on the outside of parentheses, so it is just attached to the number, not the sign in front of the number. Okay, let's look at 9 to the 1st power. 9 to the 1st power would just be 9. So we multiply it by nothing. 9 to the 1st is just 1 9, which is 9. 5 to the 4th would be 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 5 is 25. And 25 times 25 is 625. And 5 to the 4th should be a math fact that you end up learning and memorizing, just like your multiplication tables. -1 to the 7th power, that's going to be -1 times -1 times -1 times -1, that's 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. -1 times itself 7 times. So we have to be very careful here. This negative times this negative is a positive. So I'm going to put positive right there. This negative times this negative is a positive. This negative times this negative is a positive. And then those positives times this negative will give us a negative. So we're going to end up with a negative, and then 1 times itself 7 times is 1. So what you end up having is if you have an odd number of negatives, you'll end up with a negative product. And if you have an even number of negatives, you'll end up with a positive product. Okay, let's try -2 to the 5th power. See if you can try this one. See if you can get this one right. You're going to need to rely back on what we talked about up there in the first 2 examples. Okay, if you're going to try this on your own, press pause. Otherwise, I'm going to start writing out the answer. The opposite of 2 to the 5th, or -1 times 2 to the 5th. You can also think of this as just -1 times 2 to the 5th. And then 2 to the 5th is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. 4 times 4 times 2. That's 16 times 2, which is 32. -1 times 32 is -32. Now, 2 to the 5th is also one of those facts that would be a good idea for you to learn in your expanded math facts of exponentials. 5t raised to the 2nd power would be 5t times 5t. And then in this one, I'm going to reorganize 5 times t times 5 times t. 5 times 5 times t times t. And 5 times 5 is 25, and t times t is repeated multiplication. That would be t squared. And our last one, -5x raised to the 3rd power, is going to be -5x times -5x times -5x. And that's because this negative is on the inside of the parentheses. So it's going to get this 3rd power. So we have -5. I'm going to rewrite this. -5 times -x times -5 times, -5 times x times -5 times x times -5 times x. So this is what I'm saying. And now I'm going to reorganize -5 times -5 times -5, and then x times x times x. Well, a -5 times a -5 is a positive 25, and 25 times -5 is -125. X times itself 3 times is x cubed. Now, 5 cubed is another, 5 times 5 times 5, which is 125, is another math fact that will be helpful for you to know.